Have you ever watched someone ignore a ticking time bomb because it's not their job to defuse it? Well, today we're diving into a top-voted Reddit story about malicious compliance that literally went up in flames. So grab your popcorn and let's start reading this warehouse revenge tale. The first wisps of smoke curled up from Machine 7 like a warning whisper I'd seen 100 times before. I paused mid-step, my hand still gripping the pallet jack handle, and watched the familiar gray tendrils dance above the old conveyor system. My stomach dropped like a stone. I'd been working this warehouse floor for 8 years. I knew every machine's quirks, every warning sign, every sound that meant trouble was brewing. Machine 7 had a habit of overheating when its cooling fan got clogged with dust and debris. A simple 5-minute fix if you caught it early. But if you didn't, well, I'd seen the aftermath before. The memory of our new supervisor's voice echoed in my head from just 2 weeks prior. Protocol is protocol, people. No one touches anything that isn't their direct responsibility. I don't care if you think you know better. Gary Morrison had arrived with his clipboard and his pressed khakis, determined to whip our chaotic operation into shape. Never mind that we'd been running smoothly for years with our informal system of everyone watching out for everyone else's equipment. Never mind that cross-training and quick interventions had prevented dozens of costly breakdowns. Gary saw inefficiency where the rest of us saw teamwork. The smoke was getting thicker now, that sharp, acrid smell starting to cut through the warehouse's usual cocktail of cardboard dust and diesel fumes. I set down the pallet jack and jogged toward the supervisor's office, my work boots echoing like gunshots against the concrete floor. Gary was hunched over his computer, probably updating some spreadsheet that would never capture what really kept this place running. His fingers danced across the keyboard with the confidence of someone who'd never had to fix anything with his hands. I knocked on his open doorframe. "Hey, Gary," Machine 7's starting to smoke pretty bad. I think the cooling fan's jammed again. If I could just pop the cover off and... He didn't even look up. Those manicured fingers kept clicking away. "Is Machine 7 your responsibility?" "Well, no, but I know how to." "Then don't touch it." His voice was flat, dismissive, like he was shooing away a persistent fly. "Log it with maintenance and let them handle it. That's what we pay them for." I opened my mouth to explain that maintenance was understaffed, that Tommy wouldn't be in until noon, that this particular problem got exponentially worse if you waited even 30 minutes. But Gary finally looked up, his pale eyes sharp with the kind of irritation reserved for people who dared question his authority. Did I stutter? Protocol is protocol. Don't touch anything that isn't your job. The words hit me like a physical slap. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Fine. Protocol it was. I walked back toward my station, each step feeling heavier than the last, like I was walking through wet concrete. The smoke from Machine 7 was more visible now, a steady stream that made several other workers glance nervously in its direction. Jenny from Quality Control, a sharp-eyed woman who never missed a defect, caught my eye and mouthed, "You gonna fix that?" I shrugged and made an exaggerated gesture toward Gary's office. Her face fell as understanding dawned, her expression shifting from concern to something approaching horror. Back at my packing station, I tried to focus on the boxes in front of me. Tape, seal, label, stack. Tape, seal, label, stack. The familiar rhythm that had guided my hands through thousands of packages. But my eyes kept drifting to Machine 7 like a moth to flame. The smoke was definitely thicker now, and I could hear the motor straining, that high-pitched whine that meant the internal temperature was climbing fast toward the danger zone. My hands moved automatically through the packing routine while my mind raced with calculations. I'd seen this exact scenario play out twice before. Once when I was still new and too scared to speak up, and once when old Pete was supervisor and actually listened when people raised concerns. The first time had cost us 3 days of downtime and a $15,000 replacement part. The second time, Pete had greenlit a 5-minute fix that saved everything. But this wasn't Pete's warehouse anymore. The acrid smell was getting stronger, that chemical bite that made your eyes water. Other workers were starting to notice, their conversations trailing off mid-sentence as they turned toward the smoking machine. Maria from the loading dock, a grandmother of 4 who'd been here almost as long as I had, walked over with worry creasing her weathered face. "Shouldn't someone do something about that?" she asked, nodding toward Machine 7, while unconsciously backing up a step. "Gary says it's not my job," I replied, my voice coming out flatter than I intended. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head, then at the machine, then back at me. "But you know how to fix it, right? You've done it before." "Protocol is protocol," I said, echoing Gary's words. They tasted like ash in my mouth. Maria's eyes widened with dawning realization. She understood the game I was playing, even if she didn't like it. "Jesus, Mike," she whispered, then hurried back to her station. Tape, seal, label, stack. The rhythm was getting harder to maintain as the mechanical whine from Machine 7 grew louder, more desperate. I glanced at the clock on the wall, one of those industrial timepieces that had been ticking away the hours since before I started working here. 10:47 a.m. Tommy from maintenance wouldn't be in for another hour and 15 minutes, assuming he showed up on time, and assuming his beat-up Honda started this morning. My hands were starting to shake slightly as I sealed another box. Not from fear, from the sheer effort of restraining myself. Every instinct I developed over 8 years was screaming at me to drop everything and sprint to that machine. But Gary's dismissive voice kept echoing in my head, and that cold, hard thing in my chest grew heavier. Then I smelled it, that sharp chemical odor that meant we'd move past simple overheating into something genuinely dangerous. The wisps of smoke were becoming a steady stream, and now I could see other workers backing away from their stations near Machine 7, their movements casual but purposeful, like animals sensing a storm. My heart started pounding against my ribs. This was it, the point of no return, the moment when following protocol became something else entirely. I should have run to Gary's office, should have demanded he call maintenance immediately, emergency rates be damned, should have pulled the fire alarm myself. Instead, I kept packing, my movements mechanical and precise, my eyes fixed on the growing cloud of smoke while my conscience waged war with my wounded pride. 10:51 a.m. The first tongue of flame appeared so suddenly that several people gasped audibly. It flickered orange against the gray smoke, small but unmistakably real, like a match struck in a dark room. Someone, I think it was Jenny, shouted, "Fire!" And suddenly the orderly warehouse floor erupted into controlled chaos. The fire alarm's ear-splitting shriek split the air as Jenny hit the red emergency button with the heel of her palm. Workers abandoned their stations with practiced efficiency, grabbing personal items and moving toward the marked exits. We drilled for this scenario every quarter. Just never thought we'd need it for real. Gary burst out of his office like a man shot from a cannon, his face pale and panicked, his precious clipboard forgotten somewhere behind him. "What's happening? What's going on?" I calmly set down my tape gun, took a deep breath of the smoke-tinged air, and looked him straight in the eye. Machine 7 caught fire. I followed protocol and didn't touch anything that wasn't my job. For a moment, he just stared at me, the words bouncing off his comprehension like rain off glass. Then his gaze shifted to the flames now licking hungrily at the conveyor belt, the smoke billowing thick and black toward the ceiling-mounted sprinkler system that was still deciding whether this qualified as an emergency. Understanding hit him like a freight train. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, and for the first time since he'd arrived, Gary Morrison looked exactly like what he was, a man in way over his head. The fire department arrived within 8 minutes. Excellent response time for our district. But Machine 7 was already a total loss. The flames had spread to 2 adjacent conveyor sections before the suppression system finally activated, leaving behind a twisted sculpture of melted plastic and blackened metal that would haunt the warehouse floor for weeks to come. We stood in the parking lot under the gray afternoon sky, watching the last wisps of smoke clear through the open loading dock doors, while Gary fielded increasingly tense phone calls from corporate. His voice grew smaller with each conversation. Production was shut down for the rest of the day. The insurance adjuster wouldn't arrive until tomorrow morning. The replacement parts would take 2 weeks minimum to ship. and that was if they could find compatible components for our aging system. I did some quick mental math while we waited for the all clear. Lost production, overtime costs for cleanup, replacement parts, installation fees, insurance deductibles. We were looking at somewhere north of $50,000, all to avoid a 5-minute fix that would have cost us nothing but Gary's precious protocol. As we finally got permission to head home early, the first time in 8 years I'd left before my shift ended, Gary approached me near my car. His pressed khakis were wrinkled now, stained with soot and the sweat of panic. His clipboard was nowhere to be seen. "You knew this would happen," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the distant traffic. I unlocked my car door and looked back at him, studying his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been the beginning of wisdom. "I knew it was a possibility. That's exactly why I came to tell you." "But you could have." "I could have followed my instincts and fixed it myself, sure. Could have saved the company 50 grand and a lot of headaches. But you made it crystal clear that protocol was more important than experience, that following rules mattered more than preventing disasters. So I did exactly what you told me to do." Gary's shoulders sagged like a deflating balloon. For the first time since he'd arrived with his MBA and his management theories, he looked less like a supervisor and more like a man who'd just learned the most expensive lesson of his career. He started, then stopped. What was there to say, really? I climbed into my car and rolled down the window. "See you tomorrow, Gary, assuming we still have jobs tomorrow." The next morning, there was a new memo on the break room bulletin board, printed on the same official letterhead Gary used for all his policy updates. The strict protocol adherence policy had been revised to allow for emergency interventions by experienced personnel when immediate safety concerns arise. It was corporate speak for "we screwed up." Gary never explicitly apologized. I didn't expect him to. But he never again dismissed a worker's concerns about equipment, and he started making rounds on the floor instead of hiding behind his computer screen. Small changes, but meaningful ones. I still see Machine 7's replacement every day, shiny, new, and equipped with modern safety features that would have prevented the whole mess. Sometimes, usually during my lunch break when the warehouse grows quiet, I wonder if it was worth it. Letting things burn to prove a point. Watching $50,000 go up in smoke just to teach one stubborn man a lesson about the value of experience. But then I remember Gary's dismissive voice that morning, his refusal to listen, his blind faith that rules written by people who'd never set foot on a warehouse floor were more valuable than the wisdom of someone who'd spent 8 years keeping the place running. And I remember that cold, hard thing that settled in my chest when he told me it wasn't my job to care. I just did what I was told. That's the whole story of today. Honestly, this guy followed orders to perfection and taught his supervisor an expensive lesson about listening to experience over protocol. I'd give him a solid 2 out of 10 Slytherins. Just enough mischief to make his point without crossing into villain territory. So, not the jerk here. What do you think? Was this justified malicious compliance, or should he have broken protocol to save the company? Drop your verdict in the comments. That's all for today's story. Hope you enjoyed the ride. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. It really means a lot. And hey, if you're still craving more drama, mystery, or chaos, check out the next story right here on the screen. See you in the next one.